The purpose of this screencast lecture is to introduce our discussion of Adequacy Doctrine, which is best understood as a branch of Consideration Doctrine. I'll focus here on the facts of Batsakis against Dematzis, and on distinguishing the rule about adequacy from the sham consideration doctrine that we saw applied in Re Green. Let's begin with Batsakis against Dematzis, and again try to capture the essence of the case in one sentence. Please pause the video now to write out your summary sentence. How'd you do? Here's my stab at summarizing the key points. A Texas appeals court enforces Eugenia Dematzis' promise to pay $2,000 plus interest that she made in return for Batsakis giving her 500,000 drachma during the German occupation of Athens in 1941-42, because Dematzis got exactly what she bargained for. The most surprising fact about this case is probably that neither of the parties died during the terrible period of the occupation. The excerpt in the textbook paints a picture of complete desperation and widespread starvation. Another curious but much less disturbing fact is that the promissory note says that Dematzis received $2,000, but we know she instead received 500,000 drachma. Why do you suppose the parties used this fiction? Any ideas? Well, one possibility is that they were trying to avoid prohibitions against usury. Batsakis clearly intended to enforce the note in the US, where state laws limit the permissible interest rate on loans. But surely the principle of substance over form should see through this fiction. It wouldn't be very wise to advise a client to adopt such a transparent ruse. But Batsakis seems to have drafted the note himself, so maybe he was thinking about usury laws. It's also possible that Batsakis was worried about further devaluation of the drachma. But notice that he's already protected against devaluation by denominating Dematzis' promise to pay in dollars rather than drachma. It doesn't matter what currency she received. So the reason for this decision remains somewhat mysterious. But there's no mystery about Dematzis' defense to the note and the court's reaction to that argument. She contended that there was a failure of consideration. She says that the 500,000 drachma were only worth $15. We can guess she based this figure on the exchange rate in London or New York at the time. Her argument implies that she ought to repay Batsakis only $15 plus interest instead of $2,000 plus interest. The Texas Appellate Court obviously rejects this argument. The opinion relies on the so-called Adequacy Doctrine, which says that courts ordinarily shouldn't judge the value of contractual consideration. They leave it instead for the parties themselves to decide what they want to bargain for. A striking feature of the case is that the court relies heavily on Dematzis' own testimony about the agreed bargain. She got exactly what she contracted for according to her own testimony, the court says in paragraph 10. That's a particularly powerful way to rebut an adversary's argument. Base your argument on her words. More colorfully, Dematzis is hoisted on her own petard. That's an archaic but amusing expression that means blown up by her own bomb. Finally, let's compare Re Green with Batsakis. So here's how we can distinguish the adequacy and sham consideration doctrines. First, you'll want to review section 79, along with that section's comments C and D, in your reading materials. Please pause the video now while you take another look at that portion of the restatement. Okay, now, consider the following contrast. An argument about inadequate consideration is an invitation to scrutinize the value of the things exchanged. We exchanged, but I didn't get enough. That's what Dematzis is saying. This sort of argument is routinely rejected, as we see in Batsakis and comment C of the restatement. In contrast, a ruling based on a finding of sham or nominal consideration means that there was in fact no bargain. Sham or nominal consideration doesn't satisfy the requirement of Section 71. A sham bargain is no bargain at all. You should think, the promisor pretended to exchange, but actually made a gift. Courts use this doctrine to police the line between enforceable bargains and unenforceable donative promises, as we see in Green and the Corbin excerpt in the textbook. Thanks for listening.